Hi everyone, I'm Marcus Voss from AXO, and today I'm going to tell you everything that is involved in the planning of a project. Let's start with the question of whether it makes sense to plan at all. Albert Einstein is credited with the quote that planning is merely the replacement of coincidence by error. It comes anyway as it comes. And the only difference is that without planning, the things that happen are just coincidence, while with planning, the exactly same things happen, but are an error insofar as this was, of course, not in the plan. This means that not everything that is planned will actually happen. Sure, maybe it is even rather often the case that things turn out differently than expected, but of course that doesn't mean that planning is generally nonsensical. On the one hand, planning increases the probability that things will happen at all that would certainly not happen without planning. And on the other hand, if things turn out differently than planned, it is still better to be wrong than to be surprised by coincidence. From mistakes in the sense of deviations from the plan, one can at least learn something, namely where, how and why one might have planned better differently, and how one can perhaps do that better in the future. On the one hand, this means that I plan ahead in reasonable detail, but on the other hand, I also prepare myself for the fact that things may turn out differently from the very beginning and prepare myself for how I will then deal with it. That is agile planning. With regard to the control loop for steering the project ship to its destination explained in the Introduction to Project Management, that is the famous plan, do, check, act cycle. This is therefore about the first step, the plan. And so to the core question, what actually needs to be done in terms of content in order to plan a project? We divide the overall planning process into at least 5 relevant sub-processes or individual tasks. The main inputs for our planning are the scope to be delivered, the deadlines to be met, other characteristics of the project or information about its context, and the people available who could do the project with their respective skills. The first step in planning is always to estimate the effort associated with project execution. The effort estimation sub-process is primarily based on the scope to be delivered and possibly also on other characteristics of the project, that is, information on its context. See also the video on influencing factors. If the effort is now known, the dates or deadlines are added as further input, and the whole thing is now narrowed down to a time period via the capacity planning sub-process. Capacity planning thus determines how much of the effort is to be implemented and when in the available period of time, that is for each project day, project week or project month, it is determined how many personnel capacities, if any, with which basic skills are required in each case. In the third sub-process of time planning, this planned capacity is now distributed to the individual necessary work packages, or these are derived from scope and effort and distributed over time. Here, as already mentioned several times, we can and must distinguish between the overall planning of the project, which is defined rather roughly and on the basis of the higher level work packages, and the respective iteration planning, which is defined rather finely and on the basis of the lower level work packages. With these 3 steps, it is now defined what exactly has to be done and when. The team planning sub-process now determines who does this. This means that the team is defined on the basis of time planning, scope, and in particular the people available for the project with their respective skills. Besides the requirement that required and available skills must match, there are many other best practices in this area. As I said, people make projects. And, as shown here with the dashed lines, the composition of the team may again have repercussions on effort estimation as well as capacity and time planning. In reality, project planning is not a strictly sequential, but an inherently recursive and highly interconnected overall process. And finally, organizational planning deals with how these people who now make up the team actually work together. And this, like all the previous steps, may also depend to a greater or lesser extent on the characteristics of the project or the project context. We have already said a lot about this in the videos on team development and team roles. With this, we have now briefly become acquainted with the 5 most important sub-processes or individual tasks and can examine them individually in greater detail in the coming videos. And so in the next video, the first thing we'll talk about is effort estimation. Until then,